Dennis Porter, a child of just 7 years old, suffered a terrible accident with his mother. She didn't survive her injuries, leaving the boy all alone. When he was on the verge of giving up on life, something unbelievable happened. It was already nighttime, and it was raining heavily, but Dennis and his mother, Allison, had to return home. "Come on, sweetheart. I left your favorite food in the oven. We'll eat together when we get home," said Allison as she placed the boy in his safety seat. This routine happened almost every day, and Dennis would always fall asleep on the way back home. They lived in the small town of Griffin, but Allison worked in Atlanta, where her company's headquarters were located. Since she spent most of her day in Atlanta, Allison decided to enroll Dennis in a school near her office so that she could be close to him in case of an emergency. They had no other family members, so they were very attached to each other. The drives home were usually very calm, but that night the rain was heavier than usual. Dennis was startled by the noise of the passing trucks, but it seemed like everything was under control. Unfortunately, this proved to be wrong. Allison was driving carefully, while Dennis had fallen asleep in his seat in the back. That's when a truck driver attempted to overtake at high speed and ended up hitting the side of Allison's car. The vehicle was instantly thrown off the road. The car spun on the road and rolled over. Allison, still dazed and frightened by what had happened, looked back for her son, but the seatbelt and the car's position didn't allow her to see him. "It's okay, son. It's over. We're fine," she said. Dennis calmed down after hearing his mother and confirmed that he was okay in his safety seat. He wanted to cry but was too scared to let the tears fall. It took about 30 minutes for help to arrive. The truck driver responsible for the accident was the one who called for assistance. He explained that he was trying to get home for his young daughter's birthday and had his vision impaired by the rain. However, the man had completely missed his daughter's birthday as he was taken to the police station, while Allison and Dennis were taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital. It was only when the doctors began examining mother and son that they realized not everything was fine. The doctors examined Dennis and, surprisingly, found no reason for concern. However, Allison was in a more serious condition. Perhaps her concern for her son and the adrenaline of the moment had masked her problem, as the doctors discovered she had severe internal bleeding, and the woman needed to undergo emergency surgery. Dennis felt lost with all the doctors running around his mother. "Hey kid, how about we go grab something to eat?" said a doctor, taking the boy away. His name was Kevin, and he was a newly graduated resident. When he asked about Dennis's father, the boy said he had never met him and didn't even know who he was. The little boy ate a sandwich and a scoop of ice cream, but as soon as he had the chance, he asked the doctor, "Mister, is my mom going to be okay?" The resident had never dealt with such a situation and found himself without an answer. What he had learned in medical school was to never promise anything that couldn't be guaranteed. "Kid, I'm sure my colleagues are doing everything they can for your mom. But don't worry, okay? You'll be home soon." Kevin stayed by the boy's side the whole time, even when Dennis fell asleep after resisting for a long time. One of the doctors then appeared and said that Allison, still in the operating room, was conscious and wanted to see her son. The resident already suspected what was going to happen, so he woke Dennis and took him to his mother. Lying in bed, Allison asked Dennis to come closer. She asked him to swear that he would always be an honest boy and careful with others, just as he had been with her. And above all, she asked him to be stronger than ever because his life was about to change. "Finally, my dear Dennis, know that I love you and will always watch over you." Tears streamed down Allison's face as she hugged her son for the last time. Allison passed away that night, leaving Dennis to face the world all alone. With no father and no other relatives, social services were called, and Dennis had to go to an orphanage. The boy resisted a lot at first. It was hard to accept that not long ago he had a home, a mother who loved him more than anything in the world, and a stable routine. Now, none of that existed anymore. The funeral was simple and modest, with only Kevin and a few colleagues from Allison's work in attendance. The boy said goodbye to his mother and made a tearful promise. "I will always visit you, Mom, and I will never forget your last words and who you were to me." The first nights in the orphanage were not easy. His last peaceful sleep had been in the car on the way home. And then, when he suddenly woke up, The car was upside down, and his mother was screaming his name. The memories seemed to come more intensely at night. When he finally managed to sleep, Dennis would dream that Allison was walking through the orphanage door to pick him up. When he woke up, he was still enveloped in the feeling that this dream provided. He would spend hours thinking about it, becoming increasingly lonely as he didn't interact much with the other children. Being the newcomer, the other children teased him. "Hey Dennis, are you thinking about your mother's ghost again? I think you better stop being a baby and accept that she's dead and won't be coming back. No one's going to want to adopt a crybaby like you." The orphanage staff didn't seem to care about this and let things take their natural course. Some mornings, they would take all the children to a local park. There were a few playgrounds and opportunities for newly arrived and older children to play together. But this didn't work for Dennis. When he realized that the park was near the cemetery where his mother was buried, he sneaked away from the group and ran to fulfill his promise to always visit her while everyone was distracted. He couldn't leave the orphanage whenever he wanted, so he had to seize the opportunity. When he got close to the grave, Dennis sat down and began telling his mother how his life had been since she was no longer around. It was remarkable how he spoke more in just 10 minutes than he had in all the weeks he had spent at the orphanage. To the boy, it was as if she were really there. Dennis could even imagine what she would say and how she would laugh when he told something funny. "Mom, how I miss you," he thought constantly, as if it were a mantra. Dennis also talked about how much he was suffering at the orphanage, how the children were mean, and how the staff simply didn't help at all. "I have nothing left here, no one, and I don't feel happy anymore like I did with you, Mom," Dennis said, raising his voice, angry and crying. "I wish I could disappear from this world, not exist anymore. I don't want to live without you. Take me with you, take me," he shouted. Suddenly, a hand touched his shoulder and began to stroke him, as if trying to comfort him. Dennis felt warmth in his chest and thought he was dreaming, but it was too real. He quickly turned around and was met with a woman's enchanting smile. "Are you okay? I saw you were crying and decided to check if you needed anything," said the mysterious woman. Dennis tried to wipe away his tears and struggled to say everything that was stuck in his throat but couldn't. "Look, I understand it's hard, but I see that you don't want to be alone either. How about I sit next to you and we stay together?" she said, trying to comfort the boy in some way. Dennis nodded. The woman said her name was Kate and that she was there visiting the grave of her son, who had passed away a few years ago and was a bit older than Dennis. The boy then let his guard down and finally managed to communicate. He told her that his mother had died recently and that he was there to visit her, but in reality, he had run away from the orphanage's trip to be there. They talked for a while longer until Kate offered to take him back to the orphanage. Dennis didn't know the exact address, but he remembered the streets he had walked down to get there. As they were returning, they passed by the park and saw a carousel. Kate noticed how fascinated Dennis seemed by the ride and encouraged him to get on one of the horses. The carousel started to turn, and the boy smiled for the first time in weeks. Looking around, he noticed several twinkling lights on the trees and many decorations, indicating that it was already the Christmas season. When Dennis got off the ride, he accidentally stepped on something bulky. Looking down, he saw a leather wallet. There weren't many people in the park at that moment, so he discreetly bent down to pick it up, looking around to see if anyone could be the owner. When he opened the wallet, Dennis was shocked. He had never seen so much money in his life. There were several crumpled $100 bills. It was enough money for him to run away from the orphanage once and for all. Dennis went back to Kate but didn't say anything about what he had found. He wondered how a man could have dropped all that money and not come back to look for it. However, on the way out of the park, Dennis and Kate passed a security guard, and the boy felt a jolt run through his body. He remembered the promise he had made to his mother on her deathbed, to be honest and careful with others. Asking Kate to wait a moment, Dennis pulled the wallet out of his pocket and handed it to the guard, saying that someone had lost it near the carousel. "My goodness, thank goodness you found Mr. Watson's wallet, kid. He's one of our park's oldest employees and was devastated for losing his entire year-end salary. You just saved his family's Christmas, little guy." The guard turned to Kate and concluded, "Congratulations on your son, ma'am. You must be very proud of him." This last comment hurt them both silently. When Kate and Dennis finally arrived at the orphanage, They expected to find everyone worried about the boy's disappearance. However, the staff was surprised to see him returning at that hour. It was as if they hadn't even noticed that he hadn't returned with the rest of the group. The other children noticed the obvious discomfort in the room and started laughing at him. See? No one even missed the crybaby. Better run to your bed and cry again. After all, that's what you came back for, isn't it? Kate was appalled by the staff's neglect. Dennis was completely embarrassed and hurt. The woman left with a heavy heart and decided to stop by a nearby church. She prayed that Dennis would find a family that would treat him well and truly love him. In the days that followed, Kate couldn't get a good night's sleep. One night, she dreamed of her deceased son, the one she had visited on the day she met Dennis. It had been years since she last dreamed of the boy, and that's why she was shaken. She couldn't go back to sleep. She got up to get a glass of water and began recalling her last memory with her son. The two of them were at a beach, as they did almost every weekend, but she got distracted for a few seconds while applying sunscreen, and he entered the water alone. When she realized he wasn't on the shore, her heart froze. Hours later, the boy was found in the sea by the rescue team, unfortunately lifeless. In the dream, the boy appeared in a house and kept repeating the phrase, "Mom, take me with you, please," while handing her a note with an address. Drinking water in the kitchen, Kate remembered the address and wrote it down on a piece of paper so she wouldn't forget it the next morning, even though she thought it was just a dream. The next day, she told her husband what was happening. From the day she met Dennis to the strange dreams with her deceased son. "My love, I don't understand any of this, but if our son is trying to say something, I think you should listen," said the man. Kate took the address from the paper and checked on her phone if it really existed. To her astonishment, the address was real and corresponded to a home for orphan children, the same one where Dennis was living. Her husband was confused, thinking it was too much of a coincidence, but the woman then revealed that she had connected with that child at the cemetery. "I felt good with him that day. I felt like he needed me, but I also needed him. We kept each other company. He's an honest boy, and it felt like, for the first time in a long time, I was complete again," Kate said. Her husband hugged her tightly and announced that they would go to the orphanage right away. The couple was greeted by one of the staff members, who said visiting hours were over and that appointments had to be made in advance by phone. The man then explained the situation, trying to get the staff member to make an exception, but he seemed unyielding. That's when the husband remembered what Kate had told him about how they seemed to ignore how the children felt. So he offered two $50 bills. The staff member accepted without asking any more questions and opened the door for the couple. "My boss isn't here, so make the most of it," he said, smiling from ear to ear. Upon entering the room, Kate recognized Dennis within seconds. He was sitting on the sofa, alone, while the other children played. As soon as Dennis saw Kate, he ran to her and hugged her. The husband seized the moment and started asking the boy some questions. "Hey, tell me, what was a child like you doing at the cemetery at that time?" And Dennis, now more at ease, replied, looking down, "I was talking to my mom, sir. I was asking her to take me away from here, far away from here." This shocked the couple. How could someone so young say something like that? Kate and her husband exchanged glances, seemingly afraid of what they were about to suggest to each other. Obviously, they felt the urge to adopt Dennis and take him home right then, but the situation wasn't that simple. Kate didn't want to show that she was replacing her son in any way, but maybe her dream had been a kind of permission to allow herself to love another child in her home. After all, since her son had passed away, her life had never been the same, and nothing and no one seemed capable of filling that void. After much discussion at home and a plan to navigate the complicated adoption process, the couple decided it was time to move forward and, most importantly, to give a home to someone who desperately needed it. They spent months trying to meet all the requirements necessary to adopt Dennis and visited the boy almost daily during that time, ensuring he was being well treated. After what felt like an eternity, the day finally arrived, and Dennis saw Kate and her husband waiting for him at the orphanage reception. With tears in her eyes, Kate opened her arms, and Dennis ran to her. The hug they shared moved even the institution's staff and some of the children who had teased him. Dennis went home with his new family. Over time, he stopped being a reclusive child and began to relate much better to others. During a Sunday lunch, something that seemed to be a new tradition within his new family, Dennis spoke proudly. "I'm very grateful to you both for everything, but I also thank my mother. I'm sure that somehow she got me out of the orphanage. After all, she promised to take care of me." Kate also expressed her gratitude, saying that she had gone to a church the day she met Dennis. Inside, she prayed that the boy would find a family that would care for and love him dearly. She just didn't imagine that this family would be hers. Dennis and his new parents would visit the cemetery once a month in memory of their deceased loved ones. Dennis bought a bouquet of roses to adorn his mother's grave. Kate was also always there with her late son, making it clear that neither of them would ever be forgotten. Kate and Dennis felt that, in some mysterious way, they had been the true architects of that improbable union, which ultimately formed a happy family once again. As they left the cemetery, they walked toward the park, and Dennis ran to the carousel, his favorite ride. Meanwhile, his parents watched the boy spin and spin, with the greatest care and affection possible. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like, and this other video appearing on the screen now will probably move you as well. Enjoy the session, and see you in the next video.